registration for the CCE close?
So for the Carol courses for spring 2021, they are closing September 25th at midnight. And then, so that is a Friday. And so then that following Monday will be when acceptances will start, and you'll receive an email about your acceptance status on that Monday.
Okay, so that means, Jared, basically you got about a week and a half, not this Friday, but the following Friday is when the registration period would close.
Yep. And I can post the specific UK course in the chat here, and that way if you have had trouble finding the brochure or applying or whatever, you can see that directly.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, let's see here. Starting to see more and more people here. So let me just say, give a brief overview of what I see going on in this particular CCE. This particular CCE, we're going to the UK. And what we're doing is we're trying to study what is the British tradition? How does that fit into their culture? Because in a sense, there's a particular way of being British. And the British are known for their tradition that goes back centuries. And so we're going to focus on the role of the Queen in trying to understand the British tradition. So what this means is we're going to talk to some people in the UK about the role of the Queen in government today. We're going to talk to the Royal Monarchist Society. We're also scheduled to talk with a member of the Parliament about how the Queen fits in and about what legislative issues are important to people in Britain today. We're also going to talk with some Muslims from the Central Islamic Mosque there in Regent's Park in central London, find out what their lives are like. But we're also, though, going to tour certain what I would call old sites, and we're going to see the role of the monarchy in history. So we're actually going to go take a day trip out to Windsor Castle. I mean, if you haven't been to Windsor Castle in the past, it's really a neat place to go. You get to see, actually that's where the Queen lives today. That's where the Queen lives. We will, of course, won't get to see the Queen, but we will get to tour the staterooms as part of Windsor Castle. And you can kind of get a sense by looking at the staterooms about what the monarchy is all about. We will also go to Westminster Abbey. At Westminster Abbey, you get to see where the Queen, where the kings are coronated. I mean, and this is important because from the standpoint of British culture, this is when a human being becomes a little god, if you believe in the doctrine of divine rights of kings. And so how does the Church of England end up supporting the monarch? We'll also go see the Tower of London, because this is in a sense where you get to see the other side of the monarchy. You get to see how power to some extent is based upon fear. I mean, that's always been there to some extent. But the Tower of London is neat. It's neat. It's a place where a lot of history has occurred. You also get to see the royal crown. You get to see the royal jewels, the coronation jewels. And you really get a sense, I mean, because they've got some animations there around the jewels, you really get a sense of what the procession is like, what the coronation is like, what it means to be a king or a queen in Britain. We're going to spend about a week in London, and you're going to get a couple of afternoons off where you just get to go take a look at London. London is a fabulous city. It's really, really fun. Once we've been there for a week, we're then going to go up to Durham. Durham is an old center of English culture. It's in the north part of the country. We're going to take a look at the cathedral up there. We're also going to take a look at the castle, because what's interesting is that Durham has what's known as a prince bishop, someone who has authority both in the state and in the church. Why did you need someone like that? I mean, and when you look at the prince bishop, I mean, he actually has the power to raise an army. He actually had the power to actually issue his own coinage in the name of the king in North England. That's really, really different. Why did he need that kind of power up there? What was going on? But we're also going to go and have a service learning project in Newcastle, which is about 30 minutes north of Durham. And we'll get a sense of what it's like to live in northern England today. And it's very different than the south. Let's see here. Then finally, we will take a train trip. And actually, we're going to take the train from London up to Durham. So if you've never been on a high-speed train before, it's quite an experience. We don't have many long-distance trains in the United States anymore. So riding one it's really a neat experience. And it really shows you a difference in culture, I think. And then finally, we're going to take that train trip from Durham up to Edinburgh, Scotland. where we're going to talk with a man who is who I would call an expert in the development of democracy in Scotland. And this is important because the development of democracy in Scotland impacted development of democracy in the United States. And so if you can understand how it developed in Scotland, I think you have a better appreciation of democracy in our own country. So a side benefit to this particular cultural experience is not just understanding the British and the British tradition and their culture. I think it gives you a better appreciation of who we are, because in so many ways, United States culture and American government, all of it is to some extent a reaction to our British experience. And so if you understand what we were reacting against, I think you have a better appreciation for our culture today. But while we are in Edinburgh, we'll also take a look at Edinburgh Castle. We'll take a look at St. Giles Cathedral, which is where the British Civil Wars actually started in the 1640s. We'll also take a walk down the Royal Mile, go to the Palace of Holyrood House, which is the Queen's palace, the Queen's residence in Scotland. And of course, you'll have a little bit of free time there to go and explore Edinburgh on your own. We're also going to be talking with some craftsmen who live in Edinburgh to find out what it's like to be a Scots today, and find out what's different between being a Scots and being an English person. So again, it's another cultural experience there. So I think that gives you a decent overview of what we would actually be doing in the UK. And so at this point, I'm open for questions right now.
You guys can feel free to post them in the chat or unmute yourself, whatever you would like to do. Ask any questions, and you can ask general CCE questions if you have them. I can definitely answer them, or specific questions to the UK CCE for Professor Celsor.
When is this trip going?
The travel time is from May 9th to the 23rd, I believe it is. It goes from a Sunday to a Saturday. So we would be leaving O'Hare on Sunday night, Sunday evening, late afternoon, somewhere in that area, fly across the Atlantic at night. We would then be getting into Heathrow Airport sometime around 7 or 8 o'clock the next morning. Of course, need to go through customs at that point. We will then go to our lodge. We're staying at what I would call a high-end hostel. A hostel is kind of a place where, generally speaking, college students stay. And it's very simple, very basic lodging. This particular residence, or this lodge where we're staying at, is a little bit more comfortable than a regular hostel, but it also provides breakfast. And so as far as some other lodging options, it's a little more expensive, but it's cheaper than hotels and stuff like that. And because it's a hostel, you do get to be close to people your own age, and so you can talk to them occasionally. So that we'd be getting in there the next morning on the 10th, then we'll take some time to kind of look around London that afternoon. Then we'll get started with our actual study on Tuesday the 11th. And then we'll leave, I believe it's that Saturday the 23rd. So we'll be there for a total of 13 days. Okay?
I know another question students like to know about is the food. So what kinds of foods will you be eating, or what's popular? I know that's a
good question. Good question. London is known for its ethnic restaurants, and so we'll be taking on a lot of different cuisines there. In the past, we have eaten at Middle Eastern restaurants. We have eaten at Indian restaurants. We've eaten at Polish restaurants. There's actually a very large Polish contingent in Britain. And so if I have enough people who want to go back there, we'll go back there. No problem with eating at a Polish restaurant. You also, at the hostel, you also get to experience a British breakfast. It's, in some ways, it's similar to the United States, but it's not. They've got additional things like pork and beans for breakfast. That's kind of the way I look. Yes, Taylor, that's kind of my expression too. It's like, no, not for breakfast. But yeah, you get to experience a British breakfast. We'll also be taking in some pubs. Pubs are very interesting in Britain. So we'll get to experience that particular atmosphere. It's also a good place to talk to locals and see what their lives are like in Britain. So we'll be eating a lot of different restaurants. For lunch, I pretty much let you go on your own. And what I do is I take a certain amount of cash, And I give it to you before we leave. I put it in travel packets that have a little bit of cash, plus other tickets and things you might need for the various things that we go and see. And so it'll be up to you to go and find lunch on your own. And there's plenty of options around. So lunch is on your own, but we eat dinner at various ethnic restaurants, various pubs. When we get up into Scotland, I do encourage people to try haggis, which, yeah, it's maybe an acquired taste. It's not too bad. I'm not going to say what it is. I'll let you look it up. But that is a Scottish cultural dish. So those are some of the things that we would be eating while we are in Britain. The food's good. The food's actually good. Don't be thinking, if you've heard the reputation for the British of having warm beer and cold food. I'm not going to worry about the beer. We're leaving that off to the side. I don't encourage that. But as far as the food itself is concerned, it's not that bad. It's not nearly as bad as their reputation is. I think it's pretty good, actually.
And then Erica, I see you asked a question, but I wanted to clarify and also just answer it and make sure everybody could hear the answer. Do you mean the sessions by do CCEs run in the winter ever, like the courses?
Yeah, I just looked on the page, and because it has the application due for winter 2021 as well.
Yeah. Okay, so I can answer that. Normally there are, one or two offered in winter 2021. This year is unique just because winter senior leadership had already canceled travel for it. And so the course that is running was a course that could run without the travel. Normally in winter, we have a course that goes to Mexico. And there is occasionally one that runs to the Dominican Republic with a baseball theme. But yeah, of course, because of this year, they had decided that winter travel had been canceled. And so there is only one winter course right now. Just so that people are aware, you are taking the course in January and traveling in January when you take a winter course. So you will pay for those credits out of pocket. Professor Celsor's course is considered a spring 2021 course. So you're taking the course in spring and then you're traveling after. And so those credits are not out of pocket. They're in your regular tuition.
And the one thing I will say is that at one time, this was a spring course, but we set up travel for spring break. So we were going to Britain early March. Of course, that means it's compressed. We could only go to London. We were only there for a week. After the first time experiencing that, I said, never again. If you want a CCE during the spring, go south. Do not go north. It was kind of chilly in London in March. There wasn't a lot of snow, but we did have a fair amount of rain and it was cold. There's one day we took a tour of Elephant and Castle, which was I would not call it a bad neighborhood, but kind of a lower middle class, maybe a working class. That's the term I'm looking for, neighborhood. And we walked around touring it, and it was downright cold. That wind was bitter. It went right through your clothing. So I thought, no, we're not doing this again in March. It's just not the right season to go to London. So never again. But yeah, I've done a little bit of this winter and early spring stuff. All right, I know there's got to be other questions. Actually, let me see here. Show participants. I just want to see how many people are listening on here. How many do we have? See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like 7 right now. Okay. I'm going to switch back to the conversation.
Yeah, like I said, because it's recorded, I will be posting these online, and that way, students who were in class or working or whatever can definitely watch it later.
Sure. Thank you very much for that, Taylor.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, what other questions are there? What other questions? I mean, the budget, I didn't say anything about the budget. The budget is set at $39.50, and I'm committed to that price. And as a result, I did cut a day out to make sure it stayed under, but still, even so, we can definitely get it in at $39.50. And so, I mean, you'll still have a good experience at that price. I didn't want to go any more because, I do know I am very conscious of how much students have to pay for their education, and I don't want to add any more burdens to that. So I wanted to keep it as low as I could. So 3950, we're leaving May 9th, be back by the 20th. Yeah, I believe it's 23rd. What else could I say here?
I don't know if you touched on what you guys kind of talk about in the course portion.
That's a good question. That's a good question. In the past, what I've done is I have had several presentations where I started giving you the background to appreciating British culture a little bit better. So we might talk a little bit about their history, talk a little bit about the Church of England, because you have to know how religion fits into Britain. It fits in very differently than it does in the United States. Britain still has what's called an established church, which means it's still the official church of state. In some instances, in some places, it can still be supported by tax money. All that is, definitely against American custom, against American tradition. So it's very, very different. We also, though, we take time and sort of organize ourselves into various groups. So one of the things that I do is I set up, a particular group of people who are responsible for bringing along supplies for medical issues. In other words, what happens if you trip? It might be good to have someone with some, medical bandages. We have people bring Tylenol. We have people bring, simple things, but things that, might be necessary to keep people comfortable during the foreign travel. I'll also make certain people responsible for, the food. Making sure that, sort of get online, find out what kind of restaurants you want. We'll ask the class what you would like to try. And then we'll try to set up places before that. I usually appoint someone to be the technology guru. And one of the things I'm learning, people of your age, smartphones are what you're really good at. My generation, I'm much better at, much more comfortable with computers and laptops. Cell phones, I can get along on them, get around on them, but they're not my cup of tea. So I'll turn someone over and let them be the technology guru. We might talk a little bit about the tube. How do you get around on the subway system in London? Because it is huge, it's massive. So we need to talk a little bit about how do you get along on that, how you get around on it. And we also need to talk about the thing that no one wants to talk about. What if you get lost? Because that actually did happen one time. My first trip there, I had a student who fell asleep, and this is the first day that we got off the plane, the very first day. So we were all exhausted, all tired. And we got on the bus and we traveled to our lodge. Well, by the time we got there, this one student fell asleep. We were all tired. We got off the bus. He didn't. He didn't. So whenever we found that, we quickly got on our cell phones because we share each other's phone numbers. And we called them and said, all you got to do is go up to the next stop, get off, walk across the street, get on the next bus, come back to us. So we stayed there and waited for him. Ever since then, I've set up a system so that you're kind of in pods or groups. And when we get off a bus, when we get off a tube, the first thing I do is to look to the leaders, and the leaders tell me if all the people they're responsible for are off the tube. We haven't lost anyone since. So that's another thing that we do. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. It's not fun for you. It's not fun for me. It's not fun for anyone. So we come up with some ways to make sure that's not going to happen. So those are the kind of things that we do in class.
Thanks. And then we had a question about it is the course running in 2021 or 2022? So the course is for sure running in 2021. What hasn't been decided quite yet is about the travel, and senior leadership is looking to make a decision closer to the spring semester, just so that it's not made too far in advance, but far enough that you all can start planning. I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, right now it is scheduled for the summer of 2021. If we don't go to the UK, it's possible it could run in 2022, the summer after. It's not guaranteed, but it's a possibility. Okay.
Because your course runs usually every other
year, that's right. 17, 19, 21, and that's supposed to be 23.
Okay.
So yeah, it runs every other year. So yes, if you're a freshman listening to the presentation here, generally speaking, it's probably too soon for you to have a cultural experience, take a CCE. between your freshman and your sophomore years. And it might even be too soon between your sophomore and your junior year. So if you're a freshman, there's a good chance you'd want to take this class in your junior year, which would put it perfect for you in the summer of 2023. It'd be perfect.
Yep. And I did, Claire, I know you said you logged in late. I do have the link directly to the program farther up in the chat if you're interested in looking at the brochure and applying.
Let me see here, trying to think if there's anything else I can add. I think that's the major stuff we've already talked about. I'm willing to stick around if anyone has any questions right now. Any further questions?
And we don't have to go to the full end time. If you don't feel like you have anything else to share, if nobody has any questions, it's kind of up to the group. We can end it. I'm sure you would be willing to answer any student questions if they email you, and yeah.
And just remember, registration for this particular class ends not this Friday, but the following Friday. So you need to sign up by Friday.
Yep. So looks like we're done. Thank you everybody for coming. You can contact Professor Celsor. Our email cce@carrollu.edu.
Okay, I just got a question here. This is my second year at Carroll. Is it too early to take my CCE? So I guess let me answer this question out loud instead of typing a reply. Of course, it depends upon your program to some extent. I mean, some programs like nursing programs have things very, very clearly laid out. And so you have to look at your program to determine when to take it. If I'm not mistaken, you've got to have your you have to take your CCDs before you can take your CCE. That might be the only hindrance for someone taking it after their sophomore year. But if you've got all your CCDs taken care of, your cross-cultural distribution courses, I think you would be permitted to take it after your second year. But generally speaking, the habit has been, the procedure is generally to take it after your junior year. But I think it's possible to take it after your second year. It's not out of the question.
Yep.
Good question. Good question. All right. Right.
Okay. Yeah. So any further questions about general CCE can be directed to cce@carrollu.edu. Thank you all for coming.
Or you can look for you can look me up, Celsor, C-E-L-S-O-R. My first name is Scott. Send me an email directly if you have a question.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you all.
Have a good afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.